We are very pleased today to have James O'Keefe. James is an award-winning journalist and writer. He is the founder and president of Project Veritas, a not-for-profit organization that investigates corruption and fraud in both public and private institutions. James has a unique way of investigation and has caused explosive reactions from the media that have led to national and state investigations, congressional inquiries, and private legal actions. James is a graduate of Rutgers University. He founded an independent newspaper in college called the Centurion. James was the recipient of the Robert Novak Award for Journalistic Excellence in 2011. He has been named Fox News Power Player of the Week twice and was on the Forbes 30 and Under 30 list for media moguls. This year, Young Conservative Coalition awarded 5 people, including James, for their 2014 Buckley Awards. The Buckley Award goes to young professionals in recognition of significant achievements in advancing the conservative cause. It is with great pleasure I present to you James O'Keefe.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful. It's always good to be back in New Hampshire. It's a little mellower than New York. But of course, my schedule was anything but mellow. I just got in from Louisiana yesterday. Was giving Mary Landrieu some trouble, although I don't think she needs any more trouble. She's down like 100 points or whatever it is now. Let's get this microphone. So, can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, good. So, I'm here today. How many of you have heard me speak before in New Hampshire? Most of you. So, I'm not going to talk about the stuff that I talked about last time. I'm going to talk about stuff we've done recently and what we're going to do in the future. And I'm going to tell you some stories that you may have not heard. And I'm going to start with one. I'm going to work my way from most recent backwards. We just got back from Louisiana, and I was in Baton Rouge. And there was a video I released about a year ago of a crazy prosecutor who threw a book at me, screamed at me. I showed it at Marmartown. But there was more behind that story, a lot more. It turns out that all these U.S. attorneys who were involved in prosecuting me 5 years ago and were really close with Senator Landrieu, who's about to be former Senator Landrieu, all of these prosecutors, what they were doing was they were going on the internet. They were commenting about the people they were prosecuting and not using anonymous aliases, which is a huge, huge no-no. You're not allowed to do that as a prosecutor. And then they were lying about it. They all resigned except one. A woman by the name of Carla Dubinsky, who is blogging under the name Dipsis, anonymously on the web. And she is currently dutifully employed in Eric Holder's Justice Department. They all resigned except her. She makes $160,000 a year as a federal government employee. And guess what? She's working in the same component as the cases in Ferguson and New York City. So how can there be justice? How can there be justice in our country when these people, there's no accountability whatsoever and no one seems to care? So I told the story yesterday, I held a press conference in Baton Rouge, and then I proceeded to ambush the Democratic Party headquarters with a copy of these summonses, these bar complaints. So first, just so that you all know what happened, I'm going to play a brief video, and then I'm going to show the ambush, which is hilarious.
It was Senator Mary Landrieu's connections to the U.S. Attorney's Office the reason I was so aggressively prosecuted 5 years ago. In light of new revelations, ethical conduct complaints, was filed with the Louisiana Attorney Disciplinary Board. The complaints were filed against former Assistant U.S. Attorney Jan Mann, Salvatore Perricone, and the former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District, James B. Ledden. An ethics complaint was also filed with the Justice Department against Carla Dubinsky.
Listen to me, pay attention to me, listen to me. You're a nasty little cowardly spud.
I don't know if there's any way maybe we can turn the volume up a bit on the video, but he just called me a cowardly spud. This was a year ago. We're on the sidewalk at Tulane. I walk up to this. This is the most powerful prosecutor in Louisiana. And I say, Mr. Ledden, I have a question for you. Did you leak my emails? He calls the cops. I'm on a sidewalk at a public, Tulane's private, but the Supreme Court has said the sidewalks are public property. And me asking him a question, this happens every time I do ambush interviews, they call police. It's ironic because they hate the police, but they call the police. And every time, and the cop that's standing in the yellow, he's standing behind him. This former prosecutor resigned for leaking emails. He's now a dean at Tulane. He teaches law students. He resigned for corrupt behavior. And he teaches law students. And the police show up, and they just have his back. They just have this guy's back. Yeah, whatever you say, Mr. Ledden, go ahead. And then he throws a book at me, and I say, am I being detained? I say, am I being? They said, yes, you are being detained. I said, why am I being detained? I'm on a sidewalk asking a dean a question. And this happened yesterday, and we'll get to this in a minute. In Baton Rouge, I did the same thing. I presented the bar complaints to the Democratic Party, and they called the police. They called the police. Every time I ask people questions, they call the police. But I digress. Let me show you the rest of this video explaining to you what happened.
All of you, your habits, you are less than I can ever tell you.
This is former U.S. Attorney James Ledden on the sidewalk in front of the Tulane University Law School, where he is an assistant dean. This wasn't the first time Jim Ledden has thrown the book at me. On January 25th, 2010, I was arrested with 3 colleagues by the FBI, charged with entering federal property under false pretenses with the intent of committing a felony. A charge that was well beyond the facts of the case.
What was interesting about this, by way of explanation, Mary Landrieu, or soon-to-be former Senator Landrieu, actually was best friends with the prosecutor who prosecuted me. And in any other jurisdiction, they would have thrown the thing out, they would have moved it, but they didn't move it. They kept it in Louisiana. The New York Times didn't care about the Acorn story. In fact, they had spiked the Acorn story when John McCain was running against Obama, but they thought that this was very newsworthy. They put my mugshot on the Sunday New York Times on the front page above the fold.
It seemed to be an enormous overreaction to what happened. And relatively soon, within the first couple of days, the prosecutors knew that this was not any terrorist activity, and they knew that it was a politically related matter having to do with Senator Landrieu.
They actually showed our real driver's licenses, each and every one of us. I walked up to Senator Landrieu's door. It was open. Anyone could walk in. It was business hours. And I sat down on the couch. And then I said, and this was in the original FBI affidavit, I said to the secretary, I said, I'm waiting for somebody.
So in our country these days, we talk a lot about justice. In fact, that's what's dominating the news right now is justice. Justice for police, justice for defendants. Everyone's talking about justice. And I, oftentimes when I give talks, I want to talk about journalism, and I will, but I often become a sort of motivational speaker because I've lived through some of the most crazy injustices you could ever imagine. They put me in irons. They shackled 3 of my colleagues, and they put me on probation for 3.5 years. They wouldn't let me leave the state of New Jersey. I couldn't even come to New Hampshire to talk 2 years ago because they wouldn't let me leave. They let drug dealers travel. They let racketeers travel. They wouldn't let a journalist travel. And this has been the story of my life for the last 4 years. And it was all over one fact. When I was inside of a federal building, I think it should be legal to film anywhere in a federal building, but nevertheless, I was in a federal building And I stated to a secretary, she's like, why are you here? I said, I'm waiting for somebody. It was that comment, I'm waiting for somebody, that statement, which the federal government used as evidence of me lying in the federal building, therefore charge him with a crime. And nobody knows this, but that's what happened. That's what happened in Louisiana, and Senator Landrieu was behind it. And I tried to get this message out 5 years ago. No one would believe me. It turns out that just recently, all of these people resigned. They all resigned in disgrace for their overzealous behavior. And now I've been able to tell this story and put it in its appropriate context.
I didn't prosecute your case. Oh, I recuse. I recuse here. I recuse from your case.
Letton did recuse himself, but left the prosecution of the case to his number 2, Jan Mann. Mann's personal connections to Mary Landrieu were well known.
Yes, her name is actually Jan Mann. And Landrieu and Jan Mann actually went to high school together. We talk about justice in this country. The senator from Louisiana went to high school with the prosecutor who's prosecuting me for investigating Mary Landrieu. That's how broken it is, and wherever I go across the country, I hear the same story, the same corruption. And it's time we as citizens start looking into this corruption, but how do we overcome the overzealous nature of the people we're trying to investigate?
Going back to when the two went to school together, my attorney, Mike Madigan, believed that Letton's entire office should have recused itself, primarily because of...
Well, there's my attorney, Mike Madigan. We call ourselves the Irish Mafia. There's us walking out of the Louisiana courthouse. I pled guilty to this misdemeanor about 4 years ago. And Madigan, he was the most expensive attorney I've ever. He talks very slow on the phone. And he talks in a sort of Brooklynese. And but anyways, we call ourselves the Irish Mafia. We're both Irish, and he would carry a red duffel bag into court, the dirtiest duffel bag I've ever seen. I said, why do you have all this money? Why don't you buy a nice bag? He's like, well, the jury relates to my dirty bag. But there's us walking out of the courtroom after pleading guilty to a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor, I thought, it was just a misdemeanor. Couldn't do much damage to me.
relationships and personal connections with Senator Landrieu.
You looked at what remained as the leadership at that point in time, and we learned quickly on that Senator Landrieu's brother, who I believe his name was Maurice, was part of the leadership of that office with Jan Mann.
Madigan wrote a strong letter to the Justice Department, asking for the case to be moved to another jurisdiction, but that didn't happen. Jan Mann continued to press the case in spite of the outrageousness of the charges.
Well, we thought it was a very large overreach to be using that statute in the first place, particularly in light of the fact that it was obviously designed for terrorist activity. And I think the prosecutors knew pretty soon on that that was not the case.
The facts of the case were pretty straightforward, if slightly ridiculous. In January of 2010, Senator Landrieu's support of Obamacare led Louisiana voters to flood her office with complaints. The plan was to make an undercover video. United States Senator Mary Landrieu said her phones were jammed. We thought it would be revelatory and ironic and funny and YouTube-worthy if we caught her staffers on tape making derogatory comments about the Tea Party. Oh, let's just shut those phones down so those Tea Party people can't get through. Two of the participants were wearing hard hats and reflective vests purchased at a hardware store that morning. We looked absurd. We looked like the Village people. In fact, they were dressed so absurdly that one of the secretaries laughed when Letton left and said they are obviously telecom repair people. No one was fooled, and someone called the FBI. All four of those arrested faced felony charges, which Mike Madigan says made no sense at all.
There was no criminal intent. There was no effort to commit a felony. No evidence whatsoever.
But Assistant U.S. Attorney Jan Mann's prosecution was relentless. and perhaps even unethical. Privileged client attorney emails were somehow released to the press just weeks after the arrest.
The only place that could have happened from was from the seizure of James's computer by the government. Well, we thought it was extremely unprofessional, inappropriate, if not criminal action.
Madigan asked Mann to investigate the leaks, but his letter went unanswered. It now seems pretty evident that there were a lot of unethical activities going on in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Last year, 5 New Orleans police officers who had been convicted for a deadly shooting had their convictions overturned.
So there was a shooting in Katrina where police officers shot these African American people in the street. I'm not going to get into the facts of that case. Maybe the cops were guilty, maybe they weren't. But they were found guilty by a jury. And a year ago, after I last spoke in New Hampshire, a judge issued an order where he overturned all these police officers' convictions. Why did he overturn the convictions? Because the prosecutors who are prosecuting these people, the same prosecutors who are prosecuting me, were caught leaking information about them on the internet, rigging the police officers' trials, and blogging anonymously about them using certain aliases. We went through the same aliases, went on the articles on NewOrleans.com, and found they were also blogging about me the day after I was arrested. Now, they overturned the convictions of officers who committed murder. What would they do in terms of their conviction regarding my misdemeanor for saying I was waiting for somebody when in fact I wasn't?
In a 129-page ruling, a federal judge overturned the convictions, citing witness coercion, inconsistent testimony, and a scandal in which at least 3 government attorneys were revealed to have posted comments about the case online.
They had anonymously posted prejudicial comments condemning the cops before and during the trial. The government attorneys were Jan Mann, Carla Dubinsky, and Salvatore Perricone. It also turns out that one of those U.S. attorneys was blogging about me. Salvatore Perricone used the screen name Legacy USA when commenting about my case. The day after my arrest, he anonymously blogged, "Sure, they should be punished. Throw the book at them."
So that's against the law. It's against the law for a U.S. attorney to do that. So here's what I do. I filed bar complaints against all of them. I demanded that they be disbarred, and yesterday I asked Senator Landrieu for a full presidential pardon. I doubt she's going to be issuing that pardon. She would actually have to refer that matter to Eric Holder, which is hilarious. On his desk is a letter that says, "We hereby request a pardon for James O'Keefe." That's not happening. But I went ahead and decided to ambush the Democratic Party headquarters in Louisiana with a copy of all these complaints, as well as a defamation lawsuit for continuing to say that I wiretapped a senator.
Okay.
Do what? What is your goal for this?
One of these bloggers, and this is just to show you how far we're in their heads and how scared they are of Project Veritas. Everywhere you go, they're so scared that they're going to be filmed by James O'Keefe. So the other day, one of my friends was in Baton Rouge. This was before I got there, and he was filming someone, and he said, "Are you working with James O'Keefe, the one who wiretapped Senator Landrieu and broke all these laws?" So I'm going to show you this, and this is the person that I ambushed.
Well, I do a lot of things, but I do video. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and you work with James O'Keefe, right?
I know James,
You know James, though.
but I've never worked with him.
Okay, why not?
Again, kind of a weird reaction, right? She asked me, well, I've never worked with James, but I like him, I'm friends with him. And then she said something about James, very interesting. Listen to this.
For what he does.
I like a lot of his work, yeah.
Going in and illegally wiretapping a Senate office.
No, I think that's where you got.
This is the head of the Democratic Party of Louisiana, continuing to say that I wiretapped a senator. After all the defamation and all the resignations and all the corruption, the Democratic Party continues to use slander per se against me and my colleagues. On tape.
Wrong. Now, I counted that a lot of people have gotten the story wrong, including her. James never illegally wiretapped anybody. And she knew I was recording her, which means that what she said was libel. It's defamatory. You can't accuse somebody of a crime publicly. He's a public figure. James O'Keefe, well-known public figure. So James, now it's Thursday, and James at a press conference about how he was arrested here a few years ago, and there was prosecutorial misconduct, he's alleging. He's going to be filing suits. He's going to be asking them to be disbarred, the attorneys who did it. And when I showed him the video that you just saw, James noticed, of course, that there was defamation against him.
Going in and illegally wiretapping the Senate office.
No.
So there I am outside the Democratic Party. This is me yesterday, right before I hopped on the plane here. And I proceed to ask this woman questions about, will you correct the record? Will you accept my defamation lawsuit? What is your comment on all your boss's friends resigning from the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Done all types of felonies. Turns out none of that was true. We filed a complaint today with the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office, so we're going to hopefully get a correction here. Here's him. Hi. James O'Keefe.
Look at her face. Do you remember when Mike Wallace used to go into the CEO's room and the guy would be like, oh my God. I mean, she does not want to be confronted by me at that moment. And this is truth to power, right? This is what journalism ought to be. Now, it just took me 15 minutes to explain all that to you. It took weeks of research. It took reading through thousands of pages of documents. But this is journalism, and it all kind of climaxes at this moment. But I'm not done. I continue to chase her outside and demand her answers.
And ethics complaint to the DOJ.
You slammed me, and you wanted to correct that. Would you please correct your statement that I committed a felony?
Now, right now, she's calling the police. Do you think she'd call the police on CBS News? She couldn't do that. But because I'm not a journalist licensed by the government, she can call the police on me. That's okay.
Ma'am?
And then when the cops do come, the headlines are James O'Keefe detained by police, instead of corrupt bureaucrat illegally calls police on journalists for exposing fraud, right? You see what I'm getting at here? How do we get around this? How do we make a difference when the odds are stacked in our favor? And that's what I'm going to talk about for the rest of today. I'm going to talk about what we did during the elections using sort of game-changing undercover video, smoking gun evidence that no one can deny, forcing resignations and earning coverage. And I'm going to start in Kentucky. Now, many of you may not be a fan of Mitch McConnell, and that's fine. But the bottom line is what was happening in his opponent's campaign was pretty ridiculous. Allison Grimes said, this is the Senate candidate Allison Grimes, said that she was a big proponent of the coal industry, when all of her staffers were saying that was a complete lie.
Project Veritas and James O'Keefe, they did some undercover work. And basically everybody that surrounds Allison Grimes is saying she's a liar on the issue of coal. Let me ask you, do you think this will have an impact? I'll roll this tape.
She supports big coal. No,
She's gonna blank them. She's gonna F-bomb them as soon as she gets elected. She's gonna F-bomb the coal industry once Allison Grimes gets elected. This guy, Nico Elmlet, is a billionaire. He donated $100,000 to a Democratic Political Action Committee, and he is speaking candidly about the candidate's intentions.
I predict this will have a big impact on that race.
One thing that I know from Kentucky voters, which is that they absolutely reject dishonesty. When you are so cold and calculating that you will say absolutely anything to get elected, even things that you don't believe in. Kentucky will say to you, absolutely, positively, no way. She's going to be punished for this, Sean. There's a bigger issue here, which is that people will now say anything to get themselves into office.
That's why people hate politicians.
So we did videos in actually 4 different states. This is the first one we did. But Alison Grimes was forced to go on defense. And that's a common theme at Veritas, is we put people on defense. We don't just respond to them attacking me or attacking our cause or what we believe in. We force them to respond for what they believe in. And the national media will never talk about us. They don't want to talk about it. But the local media talks about it. And in an election, that's huge, because if you're donating to a campaign, they buy advertisements in the local media market. Well, we don't buy advertisements, but our stories get picked up by the local media in breaking news fashion, as it did in Kentucky.
Activist who specializes in undercover videos has trained his sights on Kentucky's U.S. Senate race.
James O'Keefe and his group, Project Veritas, have produced secret recordings of campaign workers for Allison Leonard and Grimes in the videos. The campaign workers appear to admit that Grimes is just saying what she needs to about commitment to coal in order to get elected.
Grimes dismisses the videos and repeats her commitment to coal.
I think Kentucky himself. I speak for myself.
And she's just fumbling and bumbling and on defense, and I speak for myself. But the point is that she's on defense. And that is the ultimate goal of Veritas. Now, we also got a lot of coverage on Drudge Report, which makes the story go viral. And actually, after we released this video, just a day or two later, the same reporters who are now suddenly interested in Grimes' stance on coal decided to ask her a challenging question, and that is, did you vote for President Obama or not? And she could not answer that question. And after she did not answer that question, they halted all of the advertisements for her in the election. So many people have called me, anonymous sources, saying you basically made the difference in that election just by exposing what she believes. I didn't even have to propose what I believe in. I just had to expose what she believed in, and there's the turtle. So, what do we do next? We go to Colorado. Colorado, battleground state. It's very purple in Colorado, right? It's half blue, half red. There's this whole book called the Blue, what is it called? The Blueprint, where they talk about how they went into Colorado and changed the politics of the state of Colorado to Democrat from Republican in 2004. So I go to a makeup artist, and I'm 30 years old, but I want to look 55 years old. And they put all this makeup on, I can't even grow a mustache, actually. I don't grow facial hair. They put a mustache on, and I tweet this photo out after I get the goods. I stung this woman, and she's telling me to vote multiple times. So I get excited, I go on Twitter, I tweet out the picture of myself in costume, and the left goes, aha! We've got him, we got a picture of him, now his cover is blown, and we're going to interview every Democrat in Colorado, and have you seen this man? And many of them are going to go, yes, we saw him, and we did everything ethical, and they're going to report what they told me. We didn't break any laws. That's what Mother Jones magazine did. We caught O'Keefe trying to bait us, but we didn't fall for it. That's what they said. And this got picked up everywhere online, right? The left is rejoicing because finally O'Keefe failed in one of his sting operations. That was Monday. But on Wednesday, we actually released the video, showing them that we did not only fail, we caught them engaged in voter fraud. We caught them telling us to commit voter fraud and even behaving racist when they told us to do it. They told us to go to poor black areas and use black people's ballots because, and I'm quoting them here, black people don't care enough about voting. This was the words of the official I recorded when I was undercover.
A new video is reinforcing old fears that Colorado's all-mail ballot election is ripe for voter fraud. Conservative activist James O'Keefe, whose undercover stings target Democrats, is out with a video today that appears to show liberal activists in Colorado endorsing voter fraud. And we think that they're all registered in all Utah State. Oh, yeah? All going to get their ballots sent to...
So we go, we're gonna vote using their ballots. She goes, yeah, use their ballots. It's putting the votes to good use, is what she says. So that's awesome to commit voter fraud. That's wonderful.
The Greenpeace activist on the tape goes on to suggest that discarded ballots could be collected from what she called ghetto Aurora.
So she actually goes on to tell us what street to go to in the ghetto, what cross street we can find dumpsters with discarded ballots to then use to vote for Udo. Pretty unbelievable stuff. Well, she was fired, and the best part about it, this actually never happened to me before, because what happens is the only time the left ever talks about me is when they think they've got blood in the water. The only time your opposition will ever talk about an issue you care about is when they think you're losing on that issue. They're never going to give you coverage when you're winning. So in this case, they thought, aha, we got O'Keefe by the balls, he failed, he was found out, and then they pushed all this media, and everyone's tweeting thousands of tweets. You lost, you're a loser, you terrible person. But simultaneously, I broke the story of the voter fraud and all that media, so the combination of the media from the left and the media from the right made my name trend on Facebook. And then they had to fire the worker, and that always creates a problem for the Associated Press, because they go, oh shoot, now we got to talk about O'Keefe's video. They don't want to talk about it, but when someone gets fired and there's an investigation launched, they have to talk about it. So let's call it the perfect storm of media. And just a couple days after we did all this, the Republican went up 6 points in the election. This is my name trending on Facebook. I was trending alongside Kim Kardashian's derriere. What was the other thing trending that day? Like Honey Boo Boo made a comeback. But the story gets even weirder from there. So the combination of the left attacking me and the conservatives propping the story up, and the mainstream media forced to cover it. My name trends on Facebook, 1 billion users. The story goes even more viral. Guess what happens an hour later? Facebook shuts my account down.
Of course.
They shut, because, just so you guys know, I don't have any allies in the mainstream media. When I break a story, I break it on Twitter. I break it on Facebook. These are extraordinarily helpful tools in a democracy where the only power as citizens we have is through independent channels. We don't have any power except to put it on YouTube these days. In an extraordinary series of events, they've deprived us of the power to go on CBS News. So now they're starting to take down our Facebook pages when they don't like what we have to say. So of course I'm really angry. I think I called Austin, they shut my page down, we're all angry, but what do? I call a reporter I know who's somewhat friendly to me at a major magazine. And he sends an email to Facebook corporate and says, I'm doing a story on Facebook targeting conservatives, like the IRS targets conservatives. And guess what happens? 60 seconds after Facebook vice president gets the email, my Facebook account was reinstated. This is the quote from the reporter. I will keep the reporter's name anonymous. He said, I don't know if I actually restored your page, but the timing is amusing. I told them I'd done a tight deadline about a story about Facebook playing political favorites and pasted your disabled URL along with Google Cache. Your page went back up in 90 seconds. Truly extraordinary, and all these stories need to be told. People need to know about it. You know, I was talking with someone at the table about Planned Parenthood, which was my first foray into this type of journalism. And the first thing that ever happened to me, well before Acorn, is I was working with a young woman named Lila Rose, who was an 18-year-old freshman at the time. And we were going into Planned Parenthood with these hidden cameras, exposing them breaking the law. And we had put the video on YouTube. This is when YouTube first started. It was like 2007, right when YouTube had just begun. And I didn't know what to do with these videos. Now I have all these tactics and strategies that I use, guerrilla warfare, Alinsky tactics that I use to get the message out. But at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. So I produced this video showing them breaking the law. I put it on YouTube, and there it sat. And no one saw it because I didn't know anyone. I didn't have anyone in my network. Maybe it had 300 views on YouTube. It sat there for a few weeks, and Planned Parenthood issued me a cease and desist letter. They said, if you don't take this video off YouTube, we're going to put you in jail for violating our employees' privacy rights by filming us without their permission. Notwithstanding the concern that I have a constitutional right to film anyone I damn please, especially when they get my taxpayer money, I was very scared. Because there's a very large, powerful lobbying corporation issuing me a cease and desist letter saying, if I don't take down my reporting, I'm going to go to jail. So I remember being at UCLA, this was in 2007. I was with Lila Rose at the time. We're sitting out there on the patio. It was a beautiful day. And I'm holding this letter, and I'm thinking, what do? Do I take down my journalism? Do I comply? I mean, I have to comply. I don't have any power. I don't have any money. I'm sure there are many people in the country who are in the same position I was then, now. They don't know who to call. They don't know what to do. But something kind of overcame me as I was sitting there afraid. I thought, as afraid as I am, and as scared as I am of being sued and going to jail and all these things, I want people to know that Planned Parenthood is doing this to me. And my fear was overcome by a sense of excitement to tell the story about what Planned Parenthood was doing to Lila Rose, an 18-year-old freshman who had the audacity to go in there in the first place. So my fear, and this is important because everyone's afraid. Many of you are afraid. I know it because the first question I get asked in every audience is, are you afraid? So you're obviously afraid. So how do you overcome your fear? Well, for me it was, how do I get this message out there? And it occurred to me that the best way to get out there is to send the cease and desist letter to someone who's a reporter. I did that. The next day, Lila Rose was invited on Bill O'Reilly's show. And the day after that, Planned Parenthood took down their cease and desist letter. So the moral of the story is, there's always a way to get out of these situations, but the answer is always more information and more sunlight. By not backing down, by fighting back, and by shining a light on what Planned Parenthood was doing, Planned Parenthood lost that battle. And that's very important, and the same thing happened with Facebook. But we weren't done. So we go from Kentucky to Colorado, and now we go to the most expensive Senate race in American history. This is the North Carolina race between Tom Tillis and who's the one? Kay Haig. $100 million was spent. That's pretty sad that we have to spend that much money on an election these days. So we go in there and we basically say that we want non-citizens to vote. Non-citizens to vote. What do they say in response?
A controversy in campaign 2014, an undercover video making some waves, and you asked us to investigate. The film was produced by Project Veritas. This video appears to show a Democratic campaign manager in Mecklenburg County saying that people in this country illegally could still vote. Now that campaign manager has resigned, WBTV's Cedric Russell is investigating.
It's the video that has gotten the attention of many. Investigations have now been launched because of it. We won't be able to push it an issue. It shouldn't be an issue at all.
So he says, we say, you know, my Brazilian girlfriend here is not a United States citizen. We want her to vote. And the campaign manager for the candidate goes, shouldn't be an issue at all, go vote. Just him saying that, just him saying the words, go and do it, is a felony in North Carolina. You can't give that advice, let alone actually do it.
Oh, that's the initial answer Greg Amick gave to a voter posing as a non-citizen for this video. James O'Keefe produced it.
It appeared as though he was breaking the law.
So after this happened, we made the front page of the Charlotte Observer. There we are on the bottom. The campaign staffer resigned Friday night at 10 p.m. Unfortunately. Friday night at 10 p.m. is a bad time to break news if you're on my side because you want this to get more oxygen. But it did make the front page of the Charlotte Observer 2 days before the Senate election. And I held a press conference. Now, if I had held a press conference 3 years ago, nobody would show up. So people did. But now we've established a track record and credibility. And every time we release a video, someone resigns or gets disbarred or has to give me $20,000 for defaming me. So naturally, when I say, hey, I have a press conference, everyone shows up. So we hold a press conference in North Carolina, and everyone's there. And there's just this great moment in the press conference when, I think I have it here, when the Associated Press guy shows up, and this guy is sneering, he's angry, he's like, who is this nobody? Who is this citizen who thinks he can walk in here and give a press conference? He's obviously very angry that I'm able to command the attention of the press down there. And he says, "You're not a journalist. You don't release your full tapes."
Which because a lot of those exchanges were heavily edited. We'd like to see one of the questions.
He says the exchanges were heavily edited. By the way, no American reporter ever heavily edits anything they write in a newspaper. All that language is just constructed raw, right? They don't inject any opinion. They don't exclude any information they don't want you to hear. They provide all their reporter notebooks in full transparency, right? So you can see all their sources, right? All the time. In fact, we do that at Project Veritas. We always do release our sources. In fact, we burn our sources every time. We go undercover. We put the person on TV.
Sure. I mean, first of all, it's a standard policy of all news organizations, including all the ones in this room, to not release their full. Yeah, absolutely. We're a journalist. We do this. We did the same type of undercover reporting that Mike Wallace did. We do the same type of journalism that.
So this guy is throwing them at me, saying, "You're not a journalist. You lie to people. You don't release raw tape." And there's a sort of this I call it the cartel. It's the media cartel, like a diamond cartel. They don't want information. So the way I put it is that we're not fighting the left. We're fighting fascism. These people don't, I'm liberal. I believe in information. I'm sure many of you are probably liberal according to the traditional sense of the word. Open-minded. You want more freedom. You want more information. You want pluralism. You want democracy in action. But these people aren't that way. They aren't progressive. In fact, they're the opposite of progressive. They're authoritarian. And like Horowitz has said, inside the mind of every leftist is an authoritarian yearning to break free. And these media cartel people at the Associated Press hate the fact that independent people with no pedigree can get up there and release a story that actually does cause social change. So I say to this Associated Press reporter, I say, I will release my raw video when you release your reporter notebooks.
And Sawyer did, who won prizes, Mike Wallace. No, I'm happy to address this. We do the same type of investigative reporting that journalists have done throughout the 20th century, who've won Emmy Awards, Pulitzers, Peabodys. In fact, it's the standard of every organization not to release their full reporter notebooks so they don't compromise sources. All journalism is selectively edited, especially print journalism. But no.
So I go on for a while about this, and this guy was so angry. There he is. He was not happy about that. And oftentimes, one of the things that Andrew Breitbart taught me was that the fight really is in the trenches. Most people don't know about it. They don't play this game. But the fight is when you do things like this with journalists. You simultaneously have to get them to cover you, but you also have to bring them to justice. You have to inform them that they are wrong and they're hurting our democracy with their behavior. It is a very personal and vicious fight. And it's not fun playing sometimes because they play with ink by the barrel. I just have a YouTube and a Facebook account, which now they can shut down. We did another video in North Carolina. We did this story in New Hampshire 3 years ago. Remember Richard Head, the Attorney General, Dick Head here? Who actually, one of his henchmen assaulted Joe here just a month ago for being a poll watcher. But anyway, I'll get to Dick Head in a minute. Richard W. Head. So we went in North Carolina and we voted 20 times just like we did in New Hampshire. Same thing. We got offered ballots in the names of other people. And every single election that we did, every single video we did this cycle, investigating voter fraud in the campaign, we did videos on Grimes, on Udall, on Pryor, on Hagan. They all lost.
We need to hear.
So you can,
So that's me. That's actually me dressed like Osama bin Laden. But you can spend your money on advertising and all this stuff, but the real way is journalism. If you want to make a difference, they spend $100 million in these races. I spend like $10,000, make a video, and it swings the election by 6 points. I mean, think about it. The truth is more powerful. The truth is more powerful than advocacy. The truth is more powerful than advocacy. So let's go to a story that everyone's talking about: immigration, and the amnesty plan, and the executive order. I was sitting in my office thinking, how can I do a story on immigration? And someone said, why don't you just cross the border, just go to Mexico and cross the border and put a GoPro camera on your forehead and just film yourself crossing the border. And just film how easy it is. And then somebody else said, well, why don't you expose the fact that terrorists can get across the border? So I said, why don't I pose as a terrorist and cross the border? But then I didn't want to be accused of demonstrating racism or stereotypical behavior, so instead of just posing as a Muslim, I decided to pose as the most infamous terrorist of all, that is deceased Osama bin Laden. We went to Target and got an Osama bin Laden Halloween costume. We flew into Houston Airport, took a little mini prop plane all the way down to Rio Grande. I'd never been to the Rio Grande that far west. It's actually not really a river, it's like a drainage ditch. It's about as wide as this little area here. And you could literally just hop to one side and hop to the next. They even have footbridges. But to make a show of it, I put on the costume and waded across the Rio Grande.
He's back! Nothing like James O'Keefe.
This video is from the conservative watchdog group Project Veritas.
Wading across the Rio Grande to show how easy it is to evade border security.
A recent trip by investigative reporter James O'Keefe.
Now, the funny thing about this is the criticism. The left is very funny because you know what the #1 criticism was when this came out at first? Is they said, why are you wearing sneakers, tennis shoes? I swear to you, people were tweeting at me. I get all the tweets in real time, 1,000 tweets per minute. And it's like, he's wearing tennis shoes. He has no sense of style. You gotta give me a break.
Was documented and played at the local grassroots meeting. This video has caught a lot of attention online.
A video of filmmaker James O'Keefe donning an Osama bin Laden mask.
Now watch as this Fox News reporter actually proceeds to criticize me. And I'll address this in a moment about conservatives attacking other conservatives and why they do it. But listen to his criticism. Just listen to it, and then we'll address his walking back that criticism in a minute.
In crossing the Rio Grande, shtick like that doesn't work.
One admiring website has a nickname for him, Osama bin O'Keefe.
You feel safe?
I feel hot. Genius. CNN.
Get a look at this. A filmmaker is questioning border security
Here in Cleveland. His name is James O'Keefe.
Check this out.
James O'Keefe claims he crossed Lake Erie
From Canada to Cleveland on a boat. No one stopping him. Not the police, not the Coast Guard. No questions asked in this situation.
It is possible that a small boat can come into the United States undetected.
The Coast Guard says they are looking into this matter.
That's me dressed like ISIS on a Kodiak raft going 50 miles an hour across Lake Erie into Cleveland from the Canadian border. Now they wanted to make the border issue about racism and xenophobia and Guatemalan children who didn't get enough food, but we didn't want to make it about that. We changed the entire narrative. Instead of it being about food and human rights, it became about national security. That's what this did. It shifted the entire paradigm. It was a paradigm shift.
This document obtained by the Breitbart News Network is from the Texas Department of Public Safety. It warns that ISIS is actively encouraging supporters to take advantage of the porous U.S. border. It specifically cited our tech.
The best part about the story was CNN was covering it. CNN was making fun of me, obviously.
But in the course of making fun of me, they put up a piece of the fence, showing the fence was incomplete. It just ends. And it's a funny thing, like, someone should go investigate this. The fence goes for a mile and then it ends, and then it goes for a mile and it ends. Why would anyone spend $100 million on a fence that looks like a jigsaw puzzle? And it was amazing to watch because ISIS actually responded to the video by saying, that's a good idea. We should cross this portion of the river. And when ISIS responded, that in turn forced the federal government to respond to the fact that ISIS was responding. It's just causing total chaos. And that's the whole point. We're using the Alinsky tactics against the Alinskyites. So there are these conservatives like Eric Bolling and others, and you know, I question their motives for attacking me. I don't think they're attacking me because they don't like the story. I think they're attacking me. Some have said they're attacking me because of ageism. How could this 20-something guy break all this? Some are attacking me for other reasons. Whatever the reasons they're attacking for me, one of the biggest reasons is, oh, you're just a Borat, you're just a joker, a clown. Well, Congress doesn't think we're clowning around.
Well, you know, it's interesting because an American reporter named James O'Keefe, dressed as Osama bin Laden, walked across the border of the Rio Grande River undetected. Does something like that concern you?
Actually, sir, he was not undetected. He was known to the border security agencies who saw him.
And why did they stop him when he came across?
Sir, I can't answer that question.
No, you can't answer it because...
No, they weren't there to stop me. They were lying. In fact, when we crossed the border, we had binoculars. Where are the federal government? They're all on Interstate 10, 15 miles away, stopping American citizens and harassing them. But there was no federal border patrol anywhere near where I crossed. Nowhere. In fact, later in the day, we actually did spot a border patrol agent in a white pickup truck going through the desert, and we ran towards him when he sped away. I wish I got that on video.
They weren't there to stop him, and that's a matter of being on record.
Didn't you also tell James O'Keefe to stop, that enough was enough?
To be honest with you, my apologies to Mr. O'Keefe, because now we have the Undersecretary for Homeland Security saying, yeah, there's some chatter back going on.
So Fox criticized me, but after Congress addressed the issue, Fox walked back that criticism. Of course, my enemies won't ever put that part in. They'll just talk about, oh, even Fox thinks O'Keefe has lost his mind. But this is a story. This is a phenomenal and fascinating and interesting story that needs to be told. People need to know what they're up against to do this. And much more hurtful than my critics defaming me are when my allies attack me. And they do it all the time. And the more effective you are, the more they attack you. This is something that Breitbart told me about before he died, and something that he faced. And it's something that we face. So, we changed the narrative. The New York Times front page story, ISIS plans to enter from Mexico. Buried in these stories, it mentions our story. So that little 1-minute video changed everything. And there's a video of me on the bus 20 times. A busload of impact at Project Veritas. We have, I think, made an enormous impact on our politics. Just in the last, this is just between September. From September until December, all the stuff you just saw. And I would argue that as a nonprofit, we want to do a lot more. We get asked to do this everywhere. I get about 50 tips a week. I can choose 2 a month. So obviously I need to grow this organization and grow our impact, and I can't do that without your support. Today, we have some books here, which I'll be signing if you're interested. We also have some glossy brochures that outline everything that I've told you today here. And I'd love to take a couple questions if people have questions, and then I'd actually also like to present something to Joe, the president of this organization. So first, some questions. Yes, sir.
Thank God you're on our side.
Well, I learned a lot about I learned a lot of things from Saul Alinsky. You know, I only watch MSNBC, read the Daily Post, I study them, I learn from them, because I think they're more effective at organizing, and they have an understanding of how to use language, and I think that we need to understand how to do that too. Yes, ma'am. The question is, what am I doing with my safety? And your question it makes me so sad that is the thing on people's mind when they see this. That question answers so many other questions about how bad things in our country are. That the number one thing you're thinking right now is, are they going to kill you? I mean, that's really sad that you feel that way. I don't think about that. I understand, but like I don't worry about that. If I did, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And the reason why people aren't doing what they're doing or what I'm doing is because they're afraid. And the number one thing is we just have to overcome the fear. We just have to go out and we have to put it out there and take the risks and risk everything. That's the only way you're going to save the country. You can't depend on the Senate to save the country. You can't depend on the journalists to save the country. The only way you're going to save the country is for ordinary people to do extraordinary things. I don't want to invest. And the reason why I don't do that is because I don't want to send a message to people that you know, can you imagine what it would be like if I was walking around with bodyguards and bulletproof vests. I think it would really deter people from trying to do the things I'm doing. And if they have to kill me to stop me, then you know that's not going to help their cause. That's going to put them back. Yes, ma'am.
Do you get recognized very often when you're just out in public, like flying here today?
I did. I was actually detained at JFK.
TSA?
TSA detained me for 45 minutes and targeted me. Took my stuff out of my bag. But they got to be careful about that because I could be filming them. I got the guy's badge number and everything. And he said, "What are you doing for a living?" I said, "You know what I do for a living." But then I told him, I said, "I'm a journalist and I do this government corruption." He laughed for like 30 seconds. But I get recognized mostly in airports. More and more these days. A lot of people, if they like me, I'll even be at the airport. TSA agent checks my driver's license. He'll go, "Keep doing what you're doing." Are you a supporter of mine? You're a government worker. He's like, "Yes, I'm a supporter. Don't tell anybody. Just keep doing what you're doing." And then the other thing that happens is, I was in New York and I was walking down the street, and if I'm holding a camera, that makes it much more recognizable. And someone walked up to me and said, "Are you James O'Keefe?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I hate your guts, but I want to shake your hand." So it's like they just want a picture or something. Yes.
What is your next big project? Because I just love you.
Well, we don't announce what we're doing yet because that would hurt our ability to do it.
Okay.
But we're gonna be focusing on things like these scandals that just sort of came and went, like the IRS, the veteran scandal.
Yay.
We have this idea called lifestyles of the rich and famous, like Veterans Administration. All these people making $1 million a year off of our veterans and not being there for them, which would be a good story. But there's a never-ending supply of stories. Never ending.
And are you getting enough donations to keep you going?
Never. I'm idea rich and cash poor.
Yeah.
I could hire 25 videographers tomorrow, but it would cost me $1 million. It's not cheap. My legal bills have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The IRS, the audits are never ending. The state registrations to be a charity, we're constantly, holding hearings. It's never ending. I have to have an entire staff of people just to handle all the accounting. It's very expensive. And but that's the cost of doing business. It's far less expensive than giving to a political campaign. You can give a political campaign $1 million. They won't do 10% of what I just showed you.
Yeah, right.
So I would argue it's actually a bargain from an investor standpoint. It's expensive from my standpoint because I have to go out and raise the money the old-fashioned way.
But I hope everybody here donates to your cause.
Please do. We have these donation cards here. They're, if you want to come up and talk to me, make a donation, get a book. They're right there.
John, how are you?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. The event I'm recording is running a bit long. Is there any chance I can call you back in, say, half an hour? If you want to know what it is, you can see it at the top of the grok with James O'Keefe of the
We
Seacoast.
lost our governorship. We got some very good people in.
I will. I'm interested.
But
Thank you.
I'm sensing we're going to have a big battle on our hands come 2016.
In New Hampshire or nationally? Or?
In New Hampshire, and it affects nationally as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be open to doing something. We as an organization, I don't take a party stance. I don't say I'm trying to help this party. If there's fraud, if there's a good angle on a story, then I'll come here like with the story 3 years ago with voter fraud and Richard Head. I mean, I can't make it up. The guy's name is Richard Head. And Richard Head was actually coordinating with Holder. And they sent 7 U.S. attorneys up here in New Hampshire. They actually came to one of my colleagues who lived in, what was the name of the town? Nashua. His henchmen came late at night, barged through the door, had a criminal grand jury subpoena to put my colleagues in jail and indict them, and threw it on the table and said, "Where's your son?" This is the mother of the colleague that did this story with me. And she was terrified. And she just said, my son's not here right now. And he said, well, your son did an awful lot of bad things. And this U.S. attorney, or this AG's office here, Richard Head's people, continued to harass my colleagues for months, up until people in New Hampshire passed the photo ID law in such an overwhelming majority that overrode Governor Lynch's veto of that legislation. And then they dropped the criminal grand jury subpoena, and I went and ambushed Richard Head. And now if you're in New York City and you try to walk into like some Justice Department, there's metal detectors and everything, he just walked right in. And Head came out, and I swear to God, he looked like a human penis. Richard Head. Sorry to say, but he looked, but he talked to me. He talked to me. And you can selectively edit that part out. But he walked up to me, and he was actually very forthcoming. He was very forthcoming. He admitted that he was doing this. And now we have this story. I just went on WMUR this morning to talk about Joe here was assaulted by Head's goon for being a poll watcher. So these are the types of stories, these very visual, sort of funny, but tragic stories. That's what I'm interested in doing. And maybe I'll do it for the 2016 election.
That goon's nephew happens to be Obama's speechwriter. I just thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah, the person who assaulted him is connected right with Obama.
Yeah, I live in Maine, where we were fortunate to re-elect our wonderful Republican governor. It's really quite interesting. But we have a congressional representative from the 1st District whose husband is a billionaire hedge fund owner and actually owns the majority stake in the largest newspapers and really the general media in Maine. Is that something you'd be interested in looking at? That kind of connection politically with the billionaire hedge fund owner owning so much of the media and controlling the message?
Yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that we'd be interested in. And trying to find a smoking gun there to attract people's attention. That's wonderful. We should look into that.
As good as you are, you can't do this by yourself. Are there any schools of journalism or young journalists or young wannabe journalists who are going in this direction?
It's a great question. Do the journalism schools encourage this type of thing? I found that they don't. The problem with traditional journalism is that journalists are, Washington, D.C. is a very clubby place. And when you get there, it's very difficult to actually take on these people because you rely on them to feed you information. So you can't really do what I do for the New York Times because they have to call up their sources and get information out of them. And if you start ambushing them and sabotaging them and forcing them to resign, well, that's going to put you in a position where you don't have any friends, right? So they don't teach this type of technique in journalism school. But what I found is I go back through the history books and I read about 100 years ago, Lincoln Stevens and up in Sinclair, they used to do it all the time. And for some reason, journalism has become very clubby. It's become a cartel. It's become about protecting sources. Sometimes people are just lazy. Sometimes they're afraid. They want to rise through the ranks. It's just a challenge to do it. And on campuses, I've been boycotted and banned. The students love this stuff. The young people want to do it, but their elders, their professors, their teachers, they just won't allow them to see it. They blacklist me from getting in front of them. The student, I want James O'Keefe to come, and then the office says we don't allow someone that's controversial. But we're just starting to break through. I spoke at Fordham last year. I'm speaking at a number of campuses. I think the key is just keep going. This is a brand new type of journalism. People haven't seen it before, and it just takes some time until people get acclimated to it. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
One comment. The fact that you go out there and show that you're not afraid is very important. Because the first thing, if you show fear, they prey upon you. And I'm so proud of you. You're so brave to go out there and just be yourself, and they're not afraid of you because you stand up for what's right. I'm very proud to know you, and you're a very wonderful
I actually have something to present to a couple people here. I'd like Diane to come up. I'd like Marmar to come up. And I'd like Joe to come up, if possible. So this is a frame here which shows all the front pages of the newspapers that we have gotten in the last 3 months, and these three people have been very supportive. Marmar has been very supportive, and Diane hosted me last year. She's going to host me tomorrow again. Very supportive of Veritas, helping introducing people in the state. So I just wanted to give each of you a frame from all of us at Project Veritas. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you.
I think we all want to say thank you to James. The microphone is not working.
Oh, press the red button, Joe.
Okay. We thank you, James, for your wonderful, informative presentations. And SRW would like to offer you a donation to Project Veritas.
Thank you very much.
For coming to visit us. And James, as he said, will be signing books, and he would be more than happy to take donations.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you all for coming. SRW wishes you a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and Happy Holidays. Safe travels.
Croc TV.